My name is Tyrone Chase, and I'm the interim chair of the ensemble department. And with me is
Gregory Groover, and I am the assistant chair of the ensemble department. Proud assistant chair.
Yeah, and we're proud of you. Welcome,
welcome,
everyone. All right, so start this off, Greg. Let's dive into your personal journey.
Okay. Yes. So, I mean, it's funny because I didn't know this until I started to reflect on it in the more recent years. So I should start by saying I grew up here in Boston.
Okay.
A lot of the musicians that I would hear on Sunday mornings in the church I grew up in, grew up in a musical setting in that sense. They were Berklee students, some of whom we've spoken about Melvin Hill.
What church was that?
Charles Street AME Church,
Okay.
the historic Charles Street AME Church.
Yes.
And when my dad he's the pastor of the church. When he first came to Boston, he stayed at a hotel behind Berklee.
Wow.
So this area has been a part of my life directly and indirectly for a long time. But the ensemble department, oddly enough, has played a big role in my life in that a lot of the mentors that I had, a lot of the people that I looked up to, the teachers that I was interfacing with in the city music program were ensemble department teachers.
Okay.
Right? So I can remember being a student and saying, man, I just want to get good enough to be in Winston's ensemble because I knew what that meant to work with him. Or to be playing in the at this time it would have been, I'm trying to think back the years because Brent Irvine taught one semester, Tim Mayer taught another one.
Okay.
But one of those years in the jazz ensemble, John Pierce was the guest and he played trombone with us.
Wow, okay.
So I'm thinking about all the people that I interacted with that made me really familiar with Berklee when I was in 6th, 7th, 8th grade. Long before I would end up coming to school here, those were my mentors and people I looked up to. And ironically, they're all in the ensemble department. So that's why I do realize now how thankful I am to have had a department like this that has so many great folks who were pouring back into the young musicians in Boston.
Wow. Okay.
What about you?
Mine is totally different because I'm from Washington, D.C. So when I got up here, I only knew maybe 2 or 3 people that I went to high school with that were here. And it's funny because I only came to Berklee for music production and engineering. And I really didn't know about the ensemble department or anything like that. But John Blackwell, rest in peace, John Blackwell, played with Prince, played with Justin Timberlake and a ton of other, D'Angelo and a bunch of other people. Me and him went to school at the same time. We were here together. And there was a jazz rock ensemble audition. And he knew me because we had jammed in a couple small jams around school. And he was like, hey, you need to be at B16 at such and such date, such and such time. And I auditioned. Long story short, I got it, and I never had to audition again. So when Olita Adams came, they sent a letter saying, hey, she's coming. We want you to be in this band. Can you do it? Yep. When Jonathan Butler came, same type of thing. Right. But that's how I ended up meeting Ken Zambello, Tom Stein, Dennis Montgomery. That's how I ended up meeting them. And that was kind of my way into the ensemble department. So then I met other people outside, gigs and things like that. And then I ended up being here. I mean, me and Sean Skeet, Dean Skeet, we went to school together, and a few of us others came in, Mark Copeland. So, yeah.
So it sounds like the networking that happens amongst musicians peer to peer when you're a student was still very prevalent at that time. Because that's how it was your peer who recommended you to come and audition, right?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. And then that got me connections with like upperclassmen and different people like that. So then when Liz Withers, she was Shook in the Broadway play of The Color Purple, she was doing her like demo. And I ended up playing on that. And it was crazy because I'm the youngest, and you had like Winston McCool. Right. You had another guy, he was a little bit older than me, not that much. We were in school together, but Chad Wright, drummer. Leroy Hampton was one of the producers. Carl Beatty was the engineer. So it was one of those things where like, man, I'm scared as I can be because I'm with these heavy hitters, but I'm in the room. So yeah, that did help a lot.
If we can take a step back, obviously you had a great ensemble experience when you got to Berklee, it sounds like, and led to many other performing opportunities. What was your experience like prior to school? I know where you went to high school, but what was your ensemble experience, and what were the musical things that were happening in your life that helped get you to Berklee?
Wow, that's a good question. So there were quite a few things. From Washington, D.C., born and raised, I went to Duke Ellington School of the Arts. Davy Yarborough was the jazz band director. He did a few different programs, as well as Tom Newman, who was my guitar teacher. Man, they really, looking back, man, we were very blessed to have people looking out for us in those manners and making sure that we had places to play. We took field trips to go see different people. But also shout out to Marion Barry, who was the mayor of Washington, D.C. He created programs for youth to work. And for us, like musicians, I got paid to play, basically.
Okay.
And it was like a jazz camp where we would play music and we would end up performing like at the Carter Barron or somewhere like that, other places like that. And we got paid to do that every summer.
Oh, wow.
And that was an amazing program. I mean, he had other programs that he created for youth, but that was one of those programs that was very beneficial. And we have to remember, this is like during the crack epidemic. So this is like late 80s, early 90s.
Right on. Wow. That's incredible. We had a similar program, BCYF, Boston College Youth Fund or something.
Oh, okay.
A Boston City of Boston Youth Fund.
Okay.
And they would allow for students. We were able to, it was resources for all youth that they could apply for. If you're going off into the sciences, and if there was a program that would allow you to do it, you can get paid to be there, or if you were working at the YMCA for that summer, the city could put the money towards it and you could do it. But they also allowed it to work for the 5-week program. So that was one of the, not only was it great to come to do something like 5-week, but a lot of us who were from the city of Boston, we were also getting paid too, which was amazing.
Wow, that's great. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's the only other time you sang that. It's the only other time I've heard anyone have an experience like that.
Yeah, and then that was because the city music, you were part of that as well, right? But that wasn't a paid thing. That was just a program.
Was a program. And the cool thing about that was it never, for me, it didn't feel strange anymore. I mean, I would like to think I'm outgoing and maybe a closet introvert, but I project as an outgoing person. But it wasn't until I got involved with music, at least, that I felt like I found community. I felt other people who were into the same thing. So it wasn't weird anymore for me to, to be like secretly listening to, some Broadway musical in my headphones on my way to my middle school,
Right.
So because now I was around other people who were also into music. So it never was strange. Once I got into city music,
Right.
it was like, oh, there's a host of students in the city of Boston that are into music. And I didn't realize even then how small it was who would continue on and go.
Right.
But it never felt unfamiliar once I got in that circle. So I started in city music in either 6th or 7th grade. Okay. I did it all through high school. And then came here by way of the City Music Scholarship. So.
It's funny that you said that because like the community thing, because I think that's maybe one of those things that I took for granted. Because in junior high, I went to a regular junior high school.
Okay.
And I did not tell anybody that I played guitar.
I remember you mentioned that.
Yeah,
Why is
that? It was because being that young, older people, they got it. Younger people didn't. And I remember my art teacher, I had known her all my life. She was, we went to the same church.
Okay.
She just happened to end up being my art teacher. She taught at my junior high school. She knew my mother. She knew my grandmother. She knew all my family. And she ratted me out because she was talking to the string teacher at the school. And she was like, oh, Tyrone plays guitar. And I'm like, no, please don't say that. And I'm like, nobody knows I play guitar. And it was funny because a friend of mine, she was like, Ty, you play guitar? And it was just like, man, you no. So I kept that under wraps. But to your point, like when I got to Duke Ellington, everybody was weird, if you want it. You know what I mean? It was like everybody was like that. Everybody was creative because it's an arts high school. So you had dance, you had vocals, you had instrumentalists, you had visual arts, you had theater, you had journalism. So it was like everybody had that. Like that X-Man factor type thing. Yeah.
So it's amazing. You can work alongside someone every day and you learn how much you have in common in moments like this. I mean, I think we do that, art school program and all that, but you start to learn more how, just the connection, the overarching connection of music brings people together. There's a lot more that you have in common with people that you would think. Now, obviously, in our case, we both grew up in America,
Right.
So it's a little bit more singular in terms of our paths. But when you look at the wide scope of people that music touches all over the world, there are many similar things that bring us together, which is
definitely.
I want to ask you another question. I have an idea of what the answer is. Well, I have two ideas what the answers will be, and I know that we get into some other topics. What was the record for you that kind of helped catapult you into the music and give you all the things you?
Oh man, that's hard.
Or do you remember a song that did it for you? I can think of a few that had these aha moments for me.
I can. Yeah. But you know what? It's funny. I think being a guitar, my dad plays guitar. And he bought me a guitar when I was 5. When I turned 5, I got a guitar. And he was one of them people where he didn't push it on me. Okay. I think he just wanted to see if I was going to pick it up. I would plunk on it here and there. I would carry it with me everywhere. But it would be one of those things where I would try this and that. And then when I was about 9 years old, I sat down and I was like, I'm really going to learn how to play guitar. Looking back at it now, that was around the time my parents got divorced. So I'm thinking now, subconsciously, this was a way for me to stay connected with my dad. So I end up sitting down. I'm going to learn how to play it. It was his music, the groups that he was playing in. Those were the songs I started to learn first.
What type of music was your dad playing?
Gospel quartet.
Okay.
And it was certain songs that he was like featured on, or he was playing a lot of guitar on, and I was like, I got to learn this. And it was one particular song, Never Have to Say Goodbye, but not like the Jacksons. It was an original song that they had written, and my dad is singing lead on it. He's playing guitar on it. That was the first song that I consciously sat down and said, I'm going to learn how to play. And so my dad would be my first influence. Aside from my dad, there's a bunch of different records, but one would be the George Benson. I later found out about Weekend in LA, but it was actually the record, the song, Always Knew I Had It In Me, which was on The Greatest, the movie that Ali played, Muhammad Ali played himself.
Okay.
And he sings on that record. George sings on that record. And it's the choruses that he plays the melodies. Really, really simple. But at the end, he takes this solo. And that was like aside from my dad, that was the first experience where it was like the notes jumped off the record. And I was like, man, I don't understand anything I'm listening to right now, but I have to learn how to play that. I have to learn how to play like that.
So it wasn't necessarily the notes, it was the intent, it was
the notes too.
The notes,
because I can sing the melody, and it was just like the first line I could sing. And then he went into some other stuff where I was like, at 9 or 10 years old, I'm like, this is another language that I've never heard before in my life.
Right on.
But it spoke to me where it was like, okay, I have to learn how to play like that. And then that's how I found out about Weekend in LA and all those other records. And those records really had a profound effect on me.
Right on. Yeah. Now, just because we are both educators, this is important to do. I want to make sure that we're not glossing over this. We threw out a term, quartet.
Yes.
I think a lot of people, when they hear that, especially in, you can think of string quartet. Okay, Ravel wrote some great string quartets. You think of jazz quartets. Okay, Coltrane had a jazz quartet. And then you threw out gospel as well.
Right.
I think as an umbrella term, we know what that is. Can you talk to us a little bit about what quartet is, what that sounds like, who it's involved? Because I have an idea from what I grew up, and maybe even throw out some groups that people should check out. Okay. Because it's important. It's a specific sector of the gospel music that is particularly among a certain, it's
one of those things where today's youth coming up listening to music, it would be people like Isaiah Sharkey, Chris Payton, Eric Walls. My generation, it was like Jubu Smith.
Okay.
They used to play with the Tonys. And all of these people that I just mentioned, they grew up learning they played gospel quartet. You have different eras, if you will, of it. You have like the kind that I grew up in. There was no keyboard players. So you have like Keith Wonderboy, who like that era and like Cant Spirituals, Willie Neal and Johnson and the keynotes. But then the older groups, like my family, my father's family, everybody swore by Dixie Hummingbirds. And if you ever heard of Dixie Hummingbirds, they made a couple records that were like instruments. They had drums, bass. Matter of fact, Gerald Veasley is playing on one of those earlier records because Ira Tucker is his uncle, I believe, or was his uncle, I believe. But anyway, that kind of thing where the guitar drove everything. So I mean, guitar did bass, did chords, did lead line all at the same time, and nothing was missing. So that's how I learned how to play guitar.
Which is, I want to, for those of you who aren't familiar with quartet music, that is incredible. And I think it's something that often can be glossed over, particularly things that come out of the Black church. In terms of, that's just, whether it be like, oh, they're really talented or they just grew up in it. But like, this is like to be able, because a lot of times also the person who's playing guitar, playing the bass note and doing the riff lines in between and covering the chords, sometimes is also singing the melody and singing the song along with. So like he really, like this is the highest level of musicality. Yeah. So to have that as your kind of offering into the music is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a blessing because it was like, my dad would always say, he always says, like, if you could play quartet, you could play anything. And I found that was true because being able to play the bass notes, the lead lines, and the chords, when I started to listen to James Brown, for the most part, I could play both parts together by myself. Okay. Wow. So that kind of helped me to play. It taught me the lost art, which I'm finding is rhythm guitar playing. So all of that music, and to your point, is very, very, very rich. I know people now will probably think that it's old people's music, but I mean, if you dig into it, gospel quartet has influenced a ton of people. Like the Dixie Hummingbirds, they influenced the Temptations. You would hear Otis Williams always talking about them. You would hear Dennis Edwards always talking about they were a major influence, and they influenced a ton of singers, period, but then a lot of R&B singers,
Right on. Yeah. That's the answer right there. Okay. Go get some quartet.
Definitely
records.
Get some quartet.
Check it out. Your time will be better. Your feel will be better, right? Your sound, you'll be more tasteful.
Harmonies are really clear, man.
It's all built into the music.
It's in music, and I'm sure you could attest to it. In music, the main thing is having a foundation. Whatever style of music that you play, you want to get the fundamentals first. So when you get the fundamentals, everything else is easier to grab hold of. And quartet is definitely fundamentals in a lot of different ways. But getting to you, what was those records? What were those records that?
Yeah, it's man. I had a really odd, and I appreciate it, and we joke about this quite often when you come into the office, based on what the music that I'm playing. I had a strange upbringing in that, my dad plays some piano and he writes like contemporary Christian music or worship songs, and a lot of stuff that we would sing in church. But like on one day, this is like no hyperbole, it could be the Carpenters, and then the next day my mom would have some Roberta Flack on, or then my dad would have Stevie Wonder, and it would be like seasons where like he would, I'd be like, he was like, this was not, like for a few months, like we were just nonstop. Wow. And then it would be, Aretha Franklin for a while. It just like, he would, I think he single-handedly probably would, especially when Starbucks was doing this, like they'd have, the greatest compilation of whatever. Yeah. And he would get these things and he would play them, and we'd be driving, whether it be to New York or driving to school, whatever day, wherever we were going. And there was always music playing. He loves music. So much. And then we'd also go and see musicals when they come. So like seeing Oliver Twist and seeing The Lion King a few times, or like Les Mis, I saw at least 2 or 3 times. Okay. Maybe, like, so these were things that like when he came, I was singing. So like the drama of music and things that talked about, like it jumped out at you, George's solo. I feel like music that had drama built in because of growing up in church and seeing how music can have that transferable effect on people where it's like, oh, wow, this person came in feeling like this. By the middle of the service, they projected as this by way of what was going on with music and by their faith. And then by the end, they left feeling like this, wow, okay. And I certainly wasn't making those direct connections as a 10-year-old or 9-year-old or whatever.
Right.
But I think I was attracted to that stuff, like music that had drama in it or that had a certain type of melancholy about it, or, that was always for me like some the main drivers.
Right.
When it got to jazz, I can remember the first, like Mr. Magic was a big one. You remember those? They used to have like the music of the 60s, oldies but goodies, and they'd have all these compilation CDs, and they have a bunch of them. So my parents would have a lot of them around, and that's how I'd hear about like like different Motown or whatever. But they had one. Someone gave us one on jazz or funk, and that was on there. That was like the first one on there for what. And I said, oh man, Mr. Magic, this is the coolest song ever. But for jazz, I can remember a few songs that really like just jumped out at me in terms of sound. There, and I guess this is all making sense. Blue Train, I had another Blue Train CD that someone had given me, but it was clearly one that they got from like Starbucks, where it was like Blue Train with a few other things on it.
Okay, yeah.
But I remember going to hearing I'm Old Fashioned, the way Trey, I'm probably not the right key, but the way he played that tripped me out. And Curtis Fuller's solo on that was great. Or Lee Moore, everyone's solo on that. But, and that's a record, Lazy Bird's on there, Blue Trade's on there. There's all this great stuff. But that was the song that did it for me.
Gotcha.
And then later on, the big one for me, and this is cool because we're honoring him on Thursday. And one day I'll talk about my Wayne Shorter story. I have like this, how he's been like this driving figure in my life.
Wow.
My high school teacher, when I was in 10th grade, I got into the jazz combo at the school down the road, Boston Arts Academy. And he made us a CD. And I remember putting it at the CD player that like the thing would kind of go up, and then I'd have to like push it up and then put it in there. It used to go up when you press a button. It was like the small thing. It had like speakers built in.
Right.
And you could also like charge your like
iPad. Oh, iPod.
What are these things that you used to play?
iPod?
iPod, yes. Yeah. You could charge your iPod on it and play music from there as well. It was like the first multi-use Bluetooth speaker. It wasn't Bluetooth even, but I had something like that. And I remember putting it into the CD, and the first song, I said, what is this? And it was Wade Shorter's Witch Hunt. That was one of the songs that we'd play. So he burnt us a CD when we got into the jazz combo of all the songs we were going to play for that fall season up until Winterfest. Okay. So I remember like Litha, Chicorea's Litha was on there, and that had this like hopeful, optimistic, and these are songs I still bring into ensembles or when I was teaching them previously have used. That was one, but yeah, for me, in terms of jazz, hearing Witch Hunt, which I could like visualize, like when that intro comes on and how impactful it is, and it feels like someone slaps you in the face with like what is happening, and I could see the witch hunt happening, as once they start swinging, and I'm like, oh wow, the melody, I can like see the whole thing. I mean, it's kind of a dark thing that when I look at it, it's terrible. I wouldn't want to see this, but I can visualize it, and it was like the music was being illustrated for me. And then the next song on there was Yes or No, and that was by I played that off like nonstop. Wayne Shorter's Yes or No off the record Juju. Witch Hunt is off the record Speak No Evil. Both really, really important records on the Blue Note label. Jazz music, incredible. So those are the ones that like got me into the jazz. And then Blue Trade, but I'm Old Fashioned. The ballad that Coltrane plays, it was just the perfect sound, lyrical, so emotional. Those were the recordings that did it for me early on. Then later on, I found the people that I grew to, that I kind of, more Wade Shorter, Joe Henderson, those guys. But that was beginning. And then like I said, the cool thing early is later on this week, the Global Jazz, they're honoring him
Right.
as a part of the summit. So we're going to play some of his music, both two songs that I've never played before of his music, which is not strange because he's written so much. And I think one good thing that I would recommend to people, if those who end up listening, if you just took Wayne Shorter's music, like there's certain artists I feel like, and I'm sure we could both think of them, like if you took them like, and if you only had Quincy Jones, maybe, and you just took his period and all the things he wrote for, right? You'd learn a lot about arranging from every period.
For sure.
If you took Stevie Wonder's compositions and his writing and you'd know everything about pop music, everything about jazz harmony, everything about actual harmony, vocal stacking, synthesizers. If you go through the periods. I think the same thing can be said for Wayne Shorter for me. You can learn how to write simple, beautiful melodies that make you want to cry. You learn a lot about harmony, but he also, and then all the periods, right? He goes, obviously the straight ahead, and then he's, all the stuff he's doing with Miles and kind of playing on the outskirts of almost free. And then you go with, you got Weather Report, you get to get to more fusion-based stuff, but then his actual writing for like his orchestration, I almost feel like, and I don't know this, but I almost feel like you could just take a score of any Wayne Shorter symphonic work and know just as much without having to have gone through the process of studying any of the other great composers, which you should. But I think if you had to do like a little cheat code, like we're always looking at ways to get students closer to where they're to finding their voice or the things that they need. I think Wayne's a big one for that. For me, that just teach you so much about music.
And you know what? I'm trying to think, man. I don't know if I've ever heard any of his orchestral stuff.
Okay, Eminon.
Okay.
That is his last recording. Outside of, there was a record that came out later on that Terry did, who we saw earlier today.
Right.
But that was from a Detroit festival with her Esperanza and Lionel Genovese on piano, but Eminon, he wrote for that. That's what strings and the whole thing. Wow. I saw that group at Umbria Jazz Festival, and that, so giving a little tidbit. Maybe we'll do this in an episode later on, a short bit. And I was weeping because I was thinking about like, wow, man, music got me all the way, to see. I'm looking at my hero playing some of his last concerts, and I can trace it back to that moment in the back room at my house, the first time I heard Witch Hunt, and then all the things in between that were connected to Berklee as well. So,
right. Well, I mean, we joke about it, but I mean, I think everybody's had that moment in music where it brought you to tears, or you made a connection. Maybe in the other one I'll speak on, George Benson was a huge influence on me as a kid, and I got an opportunity to go to his house, and play for him or play and him hear me play. So, and those were one of those times where I left his house, and I mean, I was on like cloud nine, and I'm texting people that I knew who would appreciate it. Like, yo, I'm leaving George Benson's house. I just met him, and he heard me play. Like, yo, I'm ready to die. Like, what I'm saying? Right. If this was it, I'm good. Like, I was just that much of a high, and having that connection, to your point earlier, like it's a community where I think we all have stories where, music touched us in such a way that it was like, maybe the only way I can say is like it was different than the average person. Yep. And it was just like, man, it really connected with us. Yep. You know what I mean? So.
Okay. So just in a few weeks, we have our midterm ratings coming up.
Yes.
And I figured this could be a really good moment for us to talk a little bit about what the ratings are, which I can tell you about in a little bit. But before we do that, why don't we hear from Tyrone on the history of the rating system and what it means?
So now we know ratings. Basically, we look at ratings for getting into the ensembles that we want to get into. So I need a certain rating to get into this ensemble, which is true. But more importantly, the rating system was and is a way to gauge your growth. So, we have numbers 1 through 8, and those originally corresponded with your semester. So say if you came in your first semester, you were all 1s. And then, semester 2, twos, you would bump up. Semester 3, all threes. Semester 4, all fours, and so on. So this was a way to be able to gauge your growth. So even if you weren't a performance major, say if you go, okay, well, I'm going to do screen scoring or music production engineering, where I'm not planning on doing a lot of playing, but I do want to have a certain level. Right. This is a way that you could gauge, like, okay, I can see where my strengths are, but I can see where my weaknesses are, and being able to capitalize on that, as well as you are able to get interaction with faculty that you may normally not have access to.
For sure.
So then they could give you insight on things that you could work on that you may have never heard of before. And, because we never know who's going to be the person or persons who could give us the life-changing advice that puts us on a whole different trajectory. For sure. So it's like, okay, we never know. So we're opening ourselves to hear from a ton of different people to be able to do that. So that's a little bit of the history.
That's great. And I love those all-in-one processes that we could find in education. You spoke about obviously growth and getting feedback, right? Being able to hear from someone else, whether it be your peers, which we often do, or your teachers, some who you know, some who you may not know or have interacted with, who's giving you something that they're hearing in your play, right? So that's great. And one of the ways that you continue to grow and track your growth is by putting yourself in scenarios that may be a little uncomfortable. And in this case, we do call it the rating auditions. Just so you know, though, you're already in the school, right? Yep. No one's taking away your scholarship because of how you did in this audition. No one's taking away where you are in your degree audit based on how you do this audition. But it's purely to let you know how you're doing and how you can assess yourself, things that you need to improve upon. So in this audition, we have 4 digits, right? Yeah. The first one, reading, instrumental skill, improvisation, and then finally, the newest one, stylistic interpretation. So the reading, that is somewhat self-explanatory. We assess that by looking at your sight reading ability, where you'll have an opportunity to quickly glance over a piece of music and, get a chance to kind of look at all the things. What are the look fors, right? You want to look at what clef you're in. These are things that I learned. I'm sure we both learned when we started playing music, right? Look at measure 1 and measure 8, or the ending, right? To see where you begin and where you end. What's similar, right? So what's your time signature that you're in? What is your clef that you're in? What key signature you're in? Yeah. Is there any dynamic markings? These are all the things that make you a good reader and helps bring out the music, right? Because it's not just about always just reading the notes at a certain point or the rhythms. It's about bringing all the other stuff out of the music. Right. So there'll be a portion that'll assess you there. There's another portion that we look at your instrumental skill, how you get around the instrument, how you are playing to the particulars of your instrument. Obviously, bowing technique is a little bit different on the cello versus what it would be on the violin versus what it would be on the upright bass, right? So these are all things where you have faculty members who are looking at you and your particular instrument and assessing where you are. And then improvisation. Now, many people, I've heard, I suspect, not at Berklee, but in other places, they'll assume that, improv, that's just jazz. And I'm not a jazz player. Where's my voice in this? We have material for all instruments and all genres where you can assess your ability to improvise. And for some genres, like in jazz, it might be your rhythm and how you play over the chord changes. But in others, it could be a little more free-flowing, right? If you're a pop singer and you or a musician, maybe it's about being lyrical and creating new melodies in the bridge, right?
Or
lyrics, right? So that's certainly one. And then the last one is your stylistic interpretation. And that is really where you can shine and thrive in terms of the music that you're interested in. So if you're a drummer who loves reggae and you come in and you play that groove and it's just sitting in the pocket and it's just feeling great and everyone's happy and everyone's moving, that's where we can highlight you and say, oh, wow, they really have the essence of this music. Or if you're a vocalist and you come in and sing an aria, they say, oh, wow, you really, the vibrato they're using is really like right in line with it, right? These are the things that will, that last digit where we really showcase what you bring to the table. So just so you know, when you come in for your audition, the vocal and instrumental auditions reflect each other, but they're a little bit different. For instrumental, you want to prepare one song, right? Something that you really know, something that you're proud of, something that you can play in your sleep. I think a lot of mistakes that I've made and others made as well is that you come in wanting to play something that you think will impress the adjudicators,
yes,
which is not at all the purpose of this. As Tyrone was mentioning earlier, it's an educational system for you. We want to know what you know and where you're at and how to track your growth. So if you go in there playing a song that's way beyond your ability, you're barely getting around it, what we're going to hear on your first time is that, this is where they're at, versus, if you played something that was maybe a little bit simpler, that you know well, that really showcased who you were as a musician, that would go a long way.
Or, the other thing is the word on the street is that we want to hear jazz.
Not the case.
And that's not the case at all. If, I know you may have come here and you're looking to study jazz. If you're just starting out, that's not necessarily the music that's going to best display whatever it is you do. We want to hear whatever music best displays what you do. So you can play with a track. So if you do heavy metal, if that's what you do, if that's what you sing, do that. If that best displays whatever your talents are, that's what we want to hear. So we don't want you, please don't feel like you have to do jazz. You could do whatever style of music that best displays what you do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I always do this. It wouldn't be right if I didn't make one either sport or food analogy. It's like cooking, right? If you invite me over, I've got to learn a little bit about Tyrone and his food taste, right? And you've got to learn a little bit about mine.
Right.
But I think one thing that we both enjoy the most is good food.
Yeah.
Right? If someone invites me over for sushi and I'm like, oh man, this is going to be great. And I go over their house and it's like, because they know I like sushi and they got all things that don't look like sushi at all, don't taste like sushi, and taste really poorly presented, right? I'm not going to be that into it. I'd rather if they say, man, this is where I'm at, I can really kill some grilled cheese. That's what I want them to make.
That's right.
Right? Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay, I know that was a kind of wild
Please butter your pan or your skillet.
A very, very
for
important
grilled
part
cheeses.
of this. And the cheeses are important. That's another episode. But so check this out. So you want to make sure you have a prepared piece. Yeah. We'll take you through some form of improv, and it might be, for some cases, it might be putting up, based on what your prepared piece was, it might have you play over a certain type of groove, or it could be playing over the chord changes of a standard, if you're going that route. But really, that's the basis of your audition. Outside of then, we'll do the sight reading and so on and so forth. Right. The same thing for voice, with the exception of you're preparing two songs. I like to recommend preparing two contrasting songs. That way, it's like if you really want to make sure that you're giving yourself the best shot of getting the best ratings, or someone really understanding where you are and who you are as a musician, I recommend showing something that's contrasting so that we can really understand where you're coming from, both sides of where you are and all the things that you bring to the table. There'll also be some sight reading for vocalists. I believe it's levels 2 through 3. You don't have to sing the words. You can just
you could use la, you could use solfege, but once you get to, if you're going for 4
and above,
their lyrics
that they'll have for the sight reading. So just one important thing for those of you who are on that cusp of maybe transitioning from a 3 to a 4, be mindful of that. In order to get to that 4th level, you have to incorporate the words when you're sight reading.
All right. And it was one thing that you alluded to, that please take advantage of doing these auditions. Even if it makes you feel uncomfortable, it's really important that you do this for your benefit. For one, because most likely you'll have to audition for something. Yep. You're getting used to doing that, and the more you get used to it, the easier it'll become. And it's a safe space, so it's not like you're going to get trashed as soon as you get in there. This is a learning experience. It's a place for you to learn. So we really, really encourage students to take advantage of every time that you're able to do a rating audition, do it. If nothing else, just to get comfortable with doing the process of what that looks like.
And most importantly, show up. Make sure you're there. If you sign up, show up.
Show up.
Put that on
please.
a t-shirt. If you sign up, show up.
Yeah.
And if you have more questions, feel free to email us at enstaff@berklee.edu. Thank you.